was a teenager. They dealt with kind of Canadian, quote unquote, Canadian themes, but my parents are Korean, I'm Korean descent, and I wanted to I felt like I was almost like not exploring 50% or 100% of a side of myself. So it was something that I always wanted to do, and I just didn't know the kind of story I wanted to tell. And I was in Korea, and I was actually at a restaurant, and I was just eating food by myself, and there was kind of a large family gathering, and they were arguing about something, and so I started eavesdropping because they were very loud, and they were talking. It was like a divided table, and it seemed like half the people they were kind of gossiping and arguing about somebody in that family. It was a big, large family gathering, and it seemed like somebody that was pregnant in that family. It seemed like half the table felt that she was not pregnant and she was lying and she was hiding it, and then the other half of the table was defending her. And I thought that was such a weird argument to have in such a public space. But then the more I thought about it, even growing up in the Korean community in Toronto, I'd always hear kind of gossips, people gossiping and rumors about how so and so were not the real child of so and that they were actually adopted, and the scandal, the shame, and all that stuff. So it got me thinking about that, and so I started doing more research and realized that it's something that is pretty prevalent in Korea. Um, so I thought this was such an interesting topic to kind of explore in a dramatic narrative, and that was sort of the journey that took me to find kind of discovering these three characters and kind of finding their voice and writing them, and yeah, so that's sort of how it started.
Did you always imagine that the ending would be so like tragic, or did you...
No, it wasn't my intention to make the most depressing film of all time, but as I was writing the film, it just kept going there, and it took a long time for me to kind of accept the fact that I wanted to write this film, because there was a lot of things about it that I speak Korean and I know Korea a little bit, but I'm certainly not as Korean as the people that live in Korea and experience some of kind of the socio-cultural kind of issues that this film sort of touches on. And also, I'm not a woman, and I don't know. I've never been pregnant, and this is not a personal story in that regard. So I didn't know if I was the right person to make this kind of film. But for whatever reason, I tried to work on other films, but they just kept kind of talking to me, and these characters just seemed to. I just knew these characters more than anything else I was kind of working on. So I just kind of let that carry the day, sort of, and then it just sort of kept going down this road. And so at a certain point, I decided to just kind of go for it.
And then, I mean, the film definitely touches on all kinds of social themes. I mean, how much of that was consciously done, or was some of that just things that just arose out of the story?
It definitely rose out of the story. I didn't want to make a soapbox film where I was trying to tell people what's right and what's wrong. But at the same time, some of the themes and some of the kind of social issues that this film deals with, it's inevitable that you have to sort of confront these things. So it just kind of came. I just wanted to make sure it came out of the characters more than anything, and it wasn't something where I was trying to impose my views or anything like that. I just wanted it to be from the characters, and it was important to me that that these people, like, nobody's right or nobody's wrong in this film. These are just three people that, they're just trying to make the best of their situation, and it's unfortunate that there's consequences to things, and I just want to kind of explore that kind of gray zone.
How about the experience of working in Korea? Working with the actors. Actually, the mother was. We showed a short film, which she was in here like 5 or 6 years ago, and that was actually like a short film winner that year. And Unbearable Heaviness of Nagging, where she was again an overbearing mother, but obviously a very talented actress. But anyway, just the experience of working with a Korean crew and cast.
It was an interesting experience. So the other part of me wanting to make a film in Korea is that making films in Canada and kind of with the same group of people, the same collaborators, I was kind of getting sort of, for myself, kind of creatively stagnant. I was kind of wanting to make the same kinds of films, or even if I wanted to make a different kind of film, they kind of kept turning into the same kind of film and working with the same people. So I wanted to kind of remove myself from that situation and force myself to kind of be on my toes and be challenged kind of creatively. So when I went to Korea, I didn't know anybody. I had no collaborators, so I had to kind of start from the ground up. And I was pretty lucky that I found like an amazing group of collaborators and these actors. A lot of them, especially the two older women, they're very experienced actors in Korea. They're character actors. The older woman is, she's kind of like a theater legend. And, it took a lot of faith for them to work with somebody that, my Korean is so-so, and they have no idea who I am. And I'm coming to them saying, I want to make this kind of sad, quiet movie. And they kind of really got it. And, they trusted me and they opened themselves up to me. And it was, without them, I couldn't have made that happen. And it was the same thing with the crew as well, the cinematographer and, the whole crew. They were just, I told them I wanted to make a different kind of film for myself, and I challenged them that, I want to find people in Korea that want to make films a different way as well, because sort of the Korean system is that, it's very top down, so you learn from your older sonbes or whatever, and then they teach you how to do it, and then because what ends up happening is that and what ends up happening is that everybody sort of learns the same way. And so, I found a group of people that wanted to do things differently. They watched European films and American films, and they're like, why can't we make movies like that? So I was like, well, let's give it a shot. So it turned out to be like a meeting halfway between sort of the way I made films and the way they make films, and it was kind of a cool kind of hybrid.
Is there an example that might be illustrative of just the difference, or some, a scene or a shot?
Sure. Well, the biggest thing was that in Korea, they have a tendency to overshoot. So because the director is king in Korea, so they have final cut. The director gets to do what the director wants to do. So what ends up happening a lot is that and this is sort of, I guess, from sort of the way that they're trained, is that you're allowed to shoot as much as you want, sort of. So they end up shooting a lot of coverage. They shoot over the shoulder, singles, wides, from the side, profile, from top, from bottom, inserts of everything. Like they overshoot. But what ends up happening is that you go in the editing room and you have all these options because they want to make sure that they've got everything covered. But when you start shooting that way, inevitably when you start editing it starts turning into kind of a patchwork of cuts and different takes. But obviously with this film, I wanted to, there's not a lot of cuts. A lot of scenes are done in single takes. And it required the actors I wanted to free the actors because because they're used to, doing takes so many times and doing it exactly the same way for sort of continuity purposes. But I wanted to kind of strip that away and let each take be a new discovery and let actors really be in the moment and kind of react to their scene partner or whatever, or their surroundings, as opposed to like knowing that you have to move the cup at this line and take a sip at this line or turn at this line or whatever it may be. And I think it took a while actually, because at first it was not that they were fine actors, but to me there was something about it that was kind of robotic. Every take was the same, and their modulations were kind of non-existent. And then it took a while for me to kind of let them know that they can free themselves a little bit, and then it allowed for kind of interesting moments to happen. So that was sort of, I guess, something that came out of it.
Awesome. And then one more question before we open up to the audience. What is the difference then between Canadian themes and America? Canada's still in North America, but the United States of America themes.
More so than the themes, because all the films I've made, there's a certain sense of melancholy or whatever that this movie shares as well. But a lot of it was, I grew up in the suburbs, and and all my friends were Canadian, like white, like Anglo-Saxon Canadians. I didn't have a lot of kind of Korean friends. So the stories I was telling were like, kind of 20-something kids in snowy towns, and like, I don't know, they were, it's what I knew, it's what was in my backyard, but it was something about it just didn't feel right. Like, some of it obviously is a part of me, but it wasn't the only part of me. And it seemed like if I just kept making films in Canada, that would be the only things I would keep exploring. So this one obviously, it deals with, women, pregnancies, Korean socio-cultural issues, things that are not directly related to my life. And I think that helped me kind of step out of myself and free myself sort of from kind of my muscle memory of the way I do things.
But in terms of like Canada versus America, do you see a difference in the storytelling or the topics covered?
Sure. Canada, Canada has a serious sort of inferiority complex, obviously, to the United States. We're the little brother. We're not even the little brother. We're like infant. We're like the pet or something. We're so much smaller and we speak the same language. There's not a lot to distinguish us at face value, and because of that, our films, for a while, a lot of our films they tried to be, kind of edgy and different just to stand out, movies that deal with like necrophilia or like weird stuff, but it wasn't really kind of connecting with the audience. And then we try to go another way and try to make Hollywood-ish kind of movies, but with, like a 20th of the budget that a Hollywood movie would have, and then they turned out terrible. So like that wasn't the way to go either. So we're sort of in a kind of an identity crisis. We perpetually in an identity crisis in terms of our cinema, which has been sort of an interesting thing to navigate. But and also Canada is it's a much younger country than the United States, and so our sort of history of immigration is much shorter than the United States as well. So in Canada, there's no Koreans that are third generation. I mean, third generation would be my child, who's 3 months old. Everybody, like my parents and everybody my age's parents, are the first people to kind of come to Canada, and their children now are my age or 5 years older, or 5 years younger, or whatever, and we're like the first kind of people making, that speak English and speak English fluently, and we're born and raised here. So we have an interesting perspective, but that's not just the Korean community, that's the Indian community, not European, but like, the Chinese community, all this kind of stuff. So there's interesting kind of voices that are starting to come up in Canada, and it seems like this is kind of an interesting opportunity for Canada to embrace kind of the multiculturalism that exists there, and kind of forge an interesting identity of what Canadian cinema can be.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'd like to open it up to the audience. Does anybody have a question? And we'll pass the mic.
Hi. I was wondering if you could explain more about your decision to not name any of the characters. Thanks.
Sure. So it's a multi-part answer. One of them is that I write my scripts chronologically, and the hardest thing for me to do is come up with character names. So, page 1, character, I can't think of a name, so I can't move on. So I was like, well, not have names. So that was one factor. The other factor is that I wanted to kind of play with points of view, but I wanted to kind of straddle a line between specificity and something that's very universal. Obviously, this film is very specific. It's about 3 specific people. It's something that, it's kind of very like intrinsically kind of a Korean film, but I wanted it to make it easy for anybody to kind of put their themselves in their shoes. And this film obviously plays with kind of perspective. It starts with the woman from the city, and then it shifts perspective to the pregnant teenager, and then it ends with the mother. And so I wanted to kind of allow people to step into each person's shoes, and I just thought the name was something that wasn't a barrier, but to me it just sounded like if we just strip that away and just make it about anybody, it was kind of an interesting way to pursue that, and then also, but I also didn't want to make it too contrived either. But in Korea, a lot of times you don't have to use people's names; you use people's titles or whatever. So, kind of the rule was that if we find ourselves kind of contorting the dialogue in a manner where we're like obviously trying to avoid names, then it's not worth it. But we shot the entire film and nobody uttered a name, so we were like, okay, let's go with that.
Another question. Any other questions? Oh, okay, back there.
Just checking. So just wondering how you came up with the title. I mean, I kind of have an idea of what In Her Place means, but I was just wondering what it means to you.
Sure. So the title was actually the last thing to come from the film. The people that worked on the film know that, like, even during the shooting of the film, we didn't have a title. We were trying to come up with a title. I had like a sweepstakes to see if somebody could come up with a title, and then no title. And then I came back to Canada and I did all the editing and post-production in Canada. And the film was being edited. There's still no title. The film was done. Still no title. We mixed the film. Still no title. And then finally, I was like, we need a title. It can't be untitled. A secret adoption Korean farm movie forever. So, but then my wife actually came and said, "In Her Place, how about that?" And then I thought about it for a second, and then it just clicked for me. Obviously, the meaning there's multiple meanings to the title. I like the fact that it's obviously a very female-driven film, and I like the fact that you can the title from the title of the film it states that. And then the idea of, like I said before, kind of the idea of perspective, points of view, and putting yourself in people's shoes and that kind of thing. So it just kind of worked out perfectly. It was weird how it took so long to come up with the title. Once we figured it out, it was like done.
Great film. In particular, I thought the three female leads was just amazing acting as well as casting. I know you mentioned a little bit about the oldest actors. Could you just talk a little bit more about the background of the three actors and how you came to cast them?
Sure. So the first actress we cast, I believe, was the woman from the city. She was sort of kind of the anchor, and then I had my eye on the mother, the oldest actress, and she's a super hip woman in real life. She's just like the coolest, youngest, 50-something woman in the world. So, I was thinking, like, can she play, kind of a poor farm woman? And but I was convinced she could do anything. So I was like, okay, that's perfect. But for the young girl, that was much more difficult. We searched all over Korea. We auditioned what seems like hundreds of actresses, and I just couldn't find the right person. A lot of, we were looking at younger actresses, obviously, and a lot of the ways they interpreted the character was a lot of kind of, stomping their feet and screaming and yelling, and it was a little bit more kind of dramatic, but also a little bit more obvious. But the way I saw the character was somebody actually that was very kind of insular and sort of like, it's almost obviously, she's kind of being shackled, and kind of her will is being sort of taken away. But I also wanted that to be like with her voice, like she's not even allowed to speak, like that kind of. So it was hard to find an actress that could kind of convey all of that. She doesn't get to say a lot, but she sort of the emotional sort of thrust of the movie and kind of the heart of the movie as well. So when kind of looking at sort of up and coming actresses didn't really work out, I thought, people like Andrea Arnold, they find these amateur actors, and how does she find them? And they're so amazing. So we tried the amateur actor route, that didn't work out. Looked at theater groups, but like in rural parts, not in Seoul, but like in smaller communities. That didn't work out. And then, but all the while we were still kind of doing these open auditions every once in a while. And this actress, An Ji, she just walked in, and then as soon as she walked in, it was like, well, there she is. So, and it was pretty late in the process, and I also kind of promised myself that if I didn't find the right actress, if I didn't find the right three actresses, I wouldn't make the film. So it was getting really close to the point where I'd have to live up to that. So I'm glad that she came around.
Question right here, or?
Hello. I thought the film was great because you did a lot with subtlety, especially the performances, obviously, but also I thought that there was such inner conflict. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely what I was going. I didn't want to make a film that was where it was force feeding anything. I wanted sort of, and I had this idea that I want. Obviously the film kind of employs a lot of longer takes. It's very deliberately paced, and I wanted to create this sense of kind of almost like real time. Like these women are here, kind of forced to be together unnaturally, and they're waiting out this period, and time is ticking, and I wanted to kind of create that sense of almost real time where you're waiting with them, and rather than and I I'm not a big fan of kind of exposition or expositional dialogue and things where you're trying to when two characters are having a conversation but they're not really having a conversation with each other, they're having a conversation on behalf of the audience so that they can get information that the audience needs as opposed to two people talking. So a lot of the writing process of this film was trying to find ways to kind of have information and have exposition, but weave it in a way that was a little bit more subtle so that the film kind of unfolds and it's not more of kind of telegraphing, plot points or people having conversations that they wouldn't necessarily have. So it was kind of a tricky balance of finding that naturalistic rhythm but also making it so that it's a narrative film with cause and effect.
We're gonna just about wrap it up here, but we're also gonna be at the bar area, so you might have to run out. Anyway, I just had one question for you to wrap it up. I was just wondering about the reception from any Korean audiences, and did they believe that it was a pretty authentic story to Korean experience?
So an interesting thing to your question is that we premiered the film in Toronto at the Toronto Film Festival, and then I had a festival tour that took me everywhere, but I never played the film in Korea until kind of the absolute end of that tour. So the question I would get asked the most at every festival would be, what do people in Korea think of the film? And I never had an answer for them because I genuinely didn't know. But when we finally did play the film in Korea and then we had our theatrical release there, I'm not that nervous about how a film is received, whether people like it or they don't like it. I think that's what movies are about, so that's totally fine. But I was kind of genuinely worried and nervous about how people in Korea would receive the film. But I was very pleasantly surprised that it seemed to be received very well, and so that was a huge relief. People seemed to be moved and it seemed to communicate something that felt authentic, even though it was made by somebody that was worried a lot that it wasn't. So, I try to do my homework. I try to do my research. I try to do everything I can to make sure that this wasn't some sort of some fraudulent endeavor, but you never know. But it seemed like for the most part, people seem to respond to it as something as something kind of authentic. So that was a huge relief.
Great. So yeah, we're just gonna wrap it up here. We have another film after this, How to Win at Checkers, at 7:30. If you guys are interested in watching that film, maybe just visit the check-in desk and we can see if we can help you out there. And then afterwards, we'll be going to the Halcyon, just right around the corner for the after party, the closing party. And it's a really cool space. It's a music shop, record store. It's also affiliated with Output, which is pretty much the dominant nightclub here. So I think it'll be an awesome opportunity to check out the space and hang out and close out the festival. So yeah. And then we'll be doing a raffle there for Wasabi restaurant and also some t-shirts. So please come by. All right. Thanks again to Albert.